Hello, welcome everyone. We'll get started here in a minute. Okay, I think we're at the top of the hour here. So thank you for everyone who has joined us, and special thanks to Zahed and Jeff who are joining us on local time in Bangladesh. It's 9 p.m. there. We chose this time to accommodate all time zones within continental US. So welcome everyone. My name is Michael Green, and I'm thrilled to be moderating today's session with such a great group of experts. I've been doing business in Asia for over a decade now, living between Mumbai and Washington. I'm a lawyer by training and currently based out of Sanam S4 Group's Washington, D.C. office. And alongside my seamless team out in markets across Asia, I support U.S. businesses with their international expansion plans, helping them register subsidiaries, hiring staff, managing complex tax, HR, compliance, and other risks when operating in foreign jurisdictions. This webinar is part of a series of between Seamless and the U.S. Department of Commerce to highlight opportunities across Asia. Today, our focus is going to be on Bangladesh, and we're lucky to have our partners from the U.S. government, from LightCastle Partners, Bauer Group Asia, and the U.S. Bangladesh Business Council with us for the session. They all bring deep regional expertise and will shed light on one of the world's fastest growing economies. In terms of the agenda for today, soon I'll hand it over to Jeff Dirks, who is the Economic and Commercial Officer for the U.S. Embassy in Dhaka, the capital of Bangladesh. After Jeff's remarks, Zahed, who is the Director of Finance, Strategy, and Consulting at LightCastle Partners, will present on why Bangladesh is an increasingly attractive export and investment destination for U.S. businesses. After Zahed's presentation, we're lucky to have Fong from Bauer Group Asia and Sid from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's U.S. Bangladesh Business Council with us to share their insights. They are both based in DC and are extremely active in the U.S. Bangladesh business and policy corridors, and will reflect on some of the trends and opportunities that they are seeing in their work. After Fong and Sid have shared their inputs, I'll lead Q&A portion of today's session. In terms of questions, please drop them into the Q&A tab throughout the presentation and session today. If you have any commentary, want to share helpful links for the audience or anything else, feel free to use the chat function as well. In terms of our aim today, it's really to get you as much information and context to help you drive decision-making for your businesses and for growth outside the US. So with that, Jeff, if I can turn it over to you for your initial remarks.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you, Michael. First of all, thank you everybody that's dialing in today for your interest in Bangladesh. I'm really excited to be able to talk to you about it. And I think after being here for 2 years, it is a place that's quite worthy of your interest. So a little bit about me first. As Michael said, I'm an economic officer for the U.S. Department of State, posted at the embassy in Dhaka. My job is to look after the interests of U.S. businesses. I'm the commercial officer equivalent in Bangladesh. So I monitor aspects of government activity, legislation that might have an effect on U.S. businesses. I try to resolve problems when they come up, disputes, or just find a way to urge the government to make a decision that aligns with what the U.S. businesses need. But fundamentally, it's to look for ways to increase our bilateral trade and investment. So a little bit about Bangladesh, about why I think you should be interested in it. For a long time, let me roll back. And one of the entrepreneurs here, a U.S. entrepreneur that has set up a business said something to me recently that really brought it to light. He said that this is the only place that he knows of where there's 170 million people, and yet it's considered a secondary market. And that's because it's immediately next door to massive India, where there's so many people and so much going on that India draws all of the attention. And for years, Bangladesh has always been a little bit on the corner and really not got any of that attention that would be normally coming there. And that entrepreneur said that Bangladesh to him was the last large undiscovered market left in the planet. And this is, and it's, frankly, I'm going to be saying that it's starting to be discovered. A little bit more about what's going on here. You probably already know about the strong economic growth that's been happening for the last 15 years. The GDP growth rate has been more than 5% for every year in the last 15. It even grew during COVID. It had downturn somewhat, but it still grew more than just about any country in the world. It also has some extremely good macro numbers. It's the GDP, the debt to GDP ratio is envious. Most countries would be very envious of that. It has a super strong foreign exchange reserve that it's built up thanks to its export of ready-made garments. And this economic growth, the things that have been happening here have positioned the country to be ready to graduate from least developed country into a middle economy. And that's coming by 2026, that's when it'll be graduating. And it's really a marker about how much has changed here in the last 50 years since independence. A couple other things to draw your attention to, it really stands out for me. Bangladesh has a single language to work with. It's Bangla, that is universally spoken, but also it broadly uses English in government and business. So if you are coming in here, you can get a lot of your work done with English, but you only really have one language to worry about, and that's Bangla, unlike other places where you have multiple languages to deal with. It's also a homogeneous society. There is a very strong central core of practices, beliefs, approaches, rules, societal rules. Everything is very common across the entire country. So you're not going to be going to different sections and have completely different standards of behavior or norms. It's going to be one thing fits just about everybody. It's a young population. Average median age is just above 27 years, which means that it's a tremendously vibrant, growing place with lots of energy, lots of labor availability. It's also got a single center of gravity. Everything is centered on Dhaka. That's the principal city, the largest city by far, and it's where everything gets done. So it's very easy to enter the Bangladesh market because you know where you need to go. You go to Dhaka and build out, and that's the way it works. A couple of other things. One thing to note is that it's centralized governmental decision making. So you don't need to go to multiple states or different centers of government to get things done. It's all done here in the center in Dhaka. And then finally, and this is a good thing for us, is that the population really has a firm belief in the quality of American products and services. They're price sensitive. I won't ever pretend that they're not, but they really do prefer American goods if they could get it. They really appreciate the quality, and that's something that's just cultural, that's built up over decades since independence. respect what we offer and prefer it in most cases. The attention that Bangladesh is getting from US businesses is increasing rapidly. As evidence of that, we have Sid Mehra here from the US Bangladesh Business Council. He'll be bringing a delegation of some 30 business executives and others from the council to Dhaka in 2 weeks. And that's massive for here. I mean, we've never had that kind of attention before, but it really shows the interest in just 1 year that the Business Council demonstrates how much interest there is on the part of large corporations in the United States, in Bangladesh, and the potential. And then also we're getting word that the Department of Commerce will be opening a Foreign Commercial Services office here in Dhaka, finally. After being discussed for a number of years, that it looks like that will be happening soon. And that is also an indication of the US government's backing and belief that this trade relationship that we've got here and the possibilities for increasing it is something that's really worth investing in. We do have a number of success stories already. US businesses have been very strong in several sectors in Bangladesh. For instance, transportation equipment. The national air carrier only flies Boeing jets. Progress Rail, a division of Caterpillar Company, has in process of delivering 40 big broad gauge locomotives to the National Railway. And just next week, we're having a commissioning ceremony for the first 8 of those locomotives that have arrived. The waterways that are essential for Bangladesh's transportation are kept open by US dredges made by 2 different companies in the United States. In the energy sector, more than half of the natural gas produced in Bangladesh comes from Chevron, who have been here for like 40 years and are the largest investor in Bangladesh by far, compared no matter who. General Electric turbines are at the heart of more than 40 of the power plants that are in the country. And by the way, it was just announced that they've achieved what they believe is 100% electrification of Bangladesh, which means that every corner of the country now has access to electricity. So those are some of the places we've got. Those are some of the points where US companies have already broken really major ground here and have laid the groundwork for a lot of people to come. But there are a lot of sectors where there's rich possibility. Some of them that have jumped out for me are healthcare, which I was surprised about originally. I didn't think that that would be a big investment area for US companies. But it turns out that the healthcare sector is quite underdeveloped in Bangladesh, and that there's a huge demand for private, for-pay, high-quality care. And they're just not feeling it, they're not getting it, and they're looking for US companies to come here and form partnership or set up operations to start providing it. In ICT, the Bangladesh university system, some of the universities produce some very high quality tech graduates, but suitable jobs for all of those graduates are hard to find. So there's a big opportunity for ICT industry to come here and set up remote operations and really make a lot of progress. Another investor told me that this is a place where he could hire an entire development team, engineers, designers, testers, for the equivalent of one tech hire in the United States. So it shows you the price advantage that people would have if they're choosing to invest in Bangladesh. Another area, things like product assembly. The government of Bangladesh has established 100 dedicated special economic zones across the country where utilities such as power and water are provided. They have access to transportation, and importantly, they have cleared title to the land, so you have certainty that the land is something that you can operate on without threat of somebody else claiming ownership of it. And it's also, it should always be emphasized, a massive ready to work workforce. They really are anxious to start putting themselves into some of these jobs. And then finally, as Bangladesh goes up the economic ladder, the middle class is growing rapidly here. The average income of the populace is growing. And because of that, consumer product demands is starting to escalate. And that's across the board on electrical appliances or items for the home, furnitures, all kinds of things, anything you can name, agricultural goods. They're interested in buying those, and they really are, like I said earlier, interested in the US products. But I always need to emphasize that you need to be aware that at times Bangladesh is a difficult place to do business. Corruption is endemic through much of the bureaucracy. So there will be many occasions as you're trying to set up operations that people will be looking for payments to expedite the service or to unblock some hidden hindrance that suddenly was identified. In addition, the bureaucracy, it moves at a glacial pace, and it's also very confusing. It's a lot of overlapping bureaucratic responsibilities, which opens up the door for people to always blame somebody else. It's always somebody else's problem to resolve or to make the final decision. Because of these reasons, we really generally always advise companies that are coming here that they really should form a partnership. They should find a local partner to help them navigate this situation. We found that over time, that's the best practice, because that local partner who grew up and became an expert in the local situation understands what's appropriate, what's an exception, and most importantly, knows how to navigate around those barriers. So having that person, and it can be an advisor, it can be a partner, however you want to do it, but having somebody on the ground with experience is really beneficial. And then I also always want to make sure that you're aware that we're here to help as well. We are a partner post for the Foreign Commercial Services Office. So we work in partnership with the offices, FCS offices in India, to provide the same services that you would find in any FCS office. So if you want somebody to do a gold key service for you, we can set that up and help push that through. Or if you want to do an international partner search, we're here to help identify people you can work with. All of those normal FCS services that you're accustomed to in other markets, we can provide that here. And then also the embassy is always here to answer questions, be a general resource for you, a sounding board, however you want to do it. We have an extremely good relationship with the business community, not only the US businesses, but with the Bangladeshi businesses. So we know a lot of them, we know how things are done, and we can really offer some good guidance if you choose to want to talk to us about it. But I do want to end with the note that I do believe that there are tremendous opportunities here for US companies. It may not be the place you would want to start your international operations, but if you have experience in other countries, particularly South Asia, this would be a very good place to expand your work. You really should, I think, consider getting on the ground floor of what I see is going to be phenomenal growth in Bangladesh, because eventually everybody's going to realize that the level of possibilities are here, and that first mover advantage will be lost. So that's all I have to say. I'll be open for questions toward the end, but I'll turn it over to Michael again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for those insights and for your remarks. I'll turn it over to Zahed now, who will kind of get into, I think, kind of expound upon your remarks in terms of why Bangladesh, why more and more U.S. exporters, U.S. investors are looking at the market. So Zahed, over to you.
Thank you, Michael, for the opportunity. So before going into the broader economic picture of Bangladesh, it's imperative to give a bit of history. So when Bangladesh gained its independence back in early 1970s, it used to be one of the second poorest country in the world. All the infrastructure and all the resources have been in shambles, and we had to start all over from square one. Over the last 40-50 years, Bangladesh has seen phenomenal growth, not only in terms of economic performance, but also in terms of human development performance as well. We have one of the best numbers in terms of infant mortality in the region, which is even higher than that of India. And this has been possible due to the concerted effort of the government and also other stakeholders, including donors and development partners. So if I move on to the next slide, I think over the last decade, Bangladesh has performed exceptionally well. We will see that the growth rate has been, GDP growth rate has been above 6% on average. And Bangladesh has maintained positive growth rate even during the pandemic, which is quite unusual if you look at the economic growth or degrowth in the region. Bangladesh is probably one of the only country in Asia, South Asia at least, where the GDP growth rate was positive. One positive thing was Bangladesh's GDP per capita surpassed that of India last year in 2020-2021, which even 10 years back would have been impossible to even think of, because there was a huge gap of 40%. So this has been possible due to investment-friendly policy. This has been due to a number of factors. We'll be talking in details in the coming few minutes. If you move on to the next slide, also, given the fact that we have a young population, Jeff mentioned about the average age of 27, Bangladesh has the 8th largest population in the world. If you consider the size of the country, the size is equal to that of Iowa, but Bangladesh's population is half that of the United States. So there are certain challenges in terms of availability of land, but you also get certain benefits, which we call density dividend, right? And we are also enjoying the population demographic dividend as well in terms of young population. If you look at the consumption part, you'll see that due to rising income, there has been a certain growth in numbers of the middle and affluent class population. According to the estimate done by BCG back in 2016, in 2025, there is expected to be around 48 million people who would be firmly within the middle and affluent class population, who would have the wallet size to actually spend on have value-added products. In terms of consumption expenditure as well, we'll also see that our consumption expenditure to GDP ratio is quite high. If you look at our neighbors as well, and it's around the consumption rate has been growing close to 8 to 9% every year, which is higher than that of the GDP growth rate, which shows that our local population also has significant demand for both local and international products. If you move on to the next slide. Yeah, in terms of FDI, given the fact that there are certain challenges in terms of doing business in Bangladesh, before the World Bank's ease of doing business ranking became defunct, Bangladesh's ranking in that index was 168, which is significantly lower than its peers. Just to set the context, India's ease of doing business ranking is in the 60s, and Vietnam's ease of doing business is in the 70s and 80s. So there is a lot of grounds to cover for Bangladesh in terms of supporting businesses. Although there are certain challenges, Bangladesh has still received some foreign direct investments, which is, although it's quite low, but there are certain opportunities or areas of improvement. If you look at the sectors which have received investments, We will see that power sector definitely has been one of the main recipients. Just as Jeff was mentioning, Chevron is one of the main players in the market, and there has been significant investments due to rising demand of fossil fuel within the country. Apart from that, the textile sector has also taken in a lot of investments. As we know, Bangladesh has the second largest apparel export sector after China, and that sector has also received a lot of investment. Food products have also come up over the last 10 years, given the rising domestic demand. Apart from that, telecommunications, banking, gas, and petroleum have also received some investments. If we move on to the next slide, please. So in terms of geopolitics as well, Bangladesh is ensconced in a very favorable strategic place in between India and China. As we know, over the coming decades, the Indian and the Chinese market would also become significantly bigger, since there is a growing middle income population cropping up as well in those countries. And Bangladesh is also strategically positioned to tap into that market as well, given our cost competitive pricing and our costing as well. In terms of our foreign relations, Bangladesh has been able to maintain a good balance with both China and India, which has been quite positive. We have received investments. We have been receiving investments from China, both at the G2G level and also from private investments, as well as from the Indian government and from private companies. Jeff was also mentioning about the special economic zones. The government has started developing special economic zones across the country. It has plans to establish 100 odd economic zones across the country, but currently they are setting up a few, 5 and 6. There are a few economic zones available for Chinese and the Indian investors as well, and it's quite easy. And the government has been trying quite hard to attract international investments, and it has become easier to enter the market than 5 years back. Kindly move on to the next slide, please. In terms of bilateral trade, the trade balance is tilted towards Bangladesh. Bangladesh exports roughly $8.3 billion to the US. As we all understand, majority being apparel, knit-based products, and a bit of footwear and other camping gears. And Bangladesh mainly imports raw materials, which include steel making, raw materials, steel, soybean, cottons, and basic ingredients, which are eventually used for the forward linkage. And another growing sector is also gaining prominence, which is the pharmaceutical sector. Bangladesh imports significantly higher volumes of APIs from the US market. If you move on to the next slide, please. In terms of ease of doing business, Bangladesh government has been working really hard in order to improve the market entry process. Bangladesh Investment Development Authority has somewhat streamlined the process for entering the market. There are significant number of steps which we will be talking about in the subsequent slides. The BIDA is actually have started this one-stop service center through which international investors can directly get relevant licenses and registration processes. And there are certain benefits in the special economic zones that the government is currently setting up in terms of tax holidays. For example, there is 100% tax holiday for the first 3 years, and there are preferential tax rates for the next 7 years, which is quite beneficial for incoming investors. Can you move on to the next slide, please? So these are the broad level market entry or the steps required for entering the market. We are only focusing on businesses who would be engaged in trading activities. There are a few other steps required for companies who are going to set up their own factories in Bangladesh. For most of the companies, or for all the companies, you would need a name clearance process from the RJSC, Register of Joint Stock Companies. You need to collect a TIN certificate, a trade license from the local government, followed by the company registration process, and which would be followed by the opening of the bank account and a VAT registration certificate as well. And all incoming companies would have to get an NOC from the Bangladesh Investment Development Authority, which directly looks at all kinds of inward coming investments. If you move on to the next slide. There are certain ways a company can enter. A US-based company looking to trade might opt for certain options. One would be setting up a branch or a liaison office within Bangladesh. which would enable them to operate, but they won't be able to earn any revenue through that enterprise. Many of the companies, international companies, actually team up with a local distributor or a local partner for engaging in trading activities. But if someone wants to become take in more control of over the operations, they might set up a liaison office or a branch office in Bangladesh. There might be other opportunities in the form of joint venture opportunities and setting up of a subsidiary business within Bangladesh as well. And there are some steps which are required for setting up those factories of those operations in Bangladesh. Next slide, please. In terms of logistics, just as Jeff was mentioning, we don't have a deep sea port within the country, so we actually have to rely on either Singapore or Dubai or Colombo for offloading all our produce. That actually takes up additional time. That increases the lead time significantly by at least 8 to 10 days. And while we don't have an economic zone, while we don't have a deep sea port right now, government is in the process of setting up a deep sea port, which hopefully will be operational within the year 2030, which would significantly reduce the lead time for many of the companies. There are certain challenges once the product enters the country. Our port is still in the process of expanding their capacity, and there might be some congestion within the port, which can actually take up a few additional days. And given the fact that we have a very compact population, traffic is also a big challenge, which also might take a few 1 or 2 additional days for transporting across the country. Although these are challenges, the government has been investing significantly on infrastructure facilities, which would partially mitigate these challenges in the coming years. Next slide, please. Bangladesh, given the fact that Bangladesh is an LDC, although Bangladesh has met a majority of the criteria to become a middle income nation, Bangladesh will become a middle income nation within the year, expected to become a middle income nation within the year 2024, within 2026. There are certain benefits that we are getting due to the dint of being an LDC. For example, we are privy to the GSP Plus facility that we get for the EU market, and which actually buys 50% of our RMG export. Apart from that, Bangladesh is also part of several trade agreements, which include SAFTA. Bangladesh also gets access to quota duty-free access to the Indian market through the SAFTA arrangements. And Bangladesh is also part of a few other trade agreements, broad-based regional trade agreements. And given the fact that Bangladesh is not going to be an LDC in the next 5 to 6 years, the government has been trying to establish bilateral relationship, bilateral trade deals with quite a few countries with which they have active trade relationship. Next slide, please. I will be focusing a bit on some of the key sectors. There are other opportunities. There are many sectors where international investors can focus on, but I'll be focusing on a few in my presentation. Next slide, please. As I have already told you, Bangladesh's biggest sector in terms of export is RMG sector. It contributes roughly around 12% of the country's GDP, and actually earns 85% of the country's export earnings, and employs roughly 4 million population, majority of them being women. So there is also a gender angle to this sector as well.
Go ahead, are you there? We'll give a minute here. It looks like his connection has been lost. We have gotten a couple questions. I know there's a few more slides that we want to cover here. Zahed, are you back?
Sorry, I got disconnected. I'll just take a couple of minutes to get over with the rest of the slides.
Sure.
So in terms of the RMG sector, Bangladesh is the 4th largest player. In the year 2021, Bangladesh exported around 7.4 billion to the US market, which constitutes 20% of the country's export, total export. Bangladesh also imports significantly in terms of cotton, and the US is one of the exporters of cotton to Bangladesh as well. And in 2021, Bangladesh earned $35 billion from apparel export. If you can move on to the next slide, please. Pharmaceutical sector is also one growing sector. Jonah, can you go to the last slide, please? Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So Bangladesh's pharmaceutical sector has been growing at a significant pace over the last 10-15 years due to rising income and also due to increased health-seeking behavior within the population. The domestic market size is around $3.2 billion US. Bangladesh last year has exported around $136 billion US, and a percentage of that has gone to the US. Four local pharmaceutical companies have the FDA approvals, and they can export to the US. Bangladesh also receives APIs from the US. US last year exported around $9 million of APIs in Bangladesh, and that figure is bound to go up as the pharmaceutical sector grows in the coming years. Next slide, please. ICT sector also has significant growth potential, although the country's current export is around $800 billion US, but it's expected that the government expects that this figure is going to go up to $5 billion within the next 3 to 4 years, and there are significant potential for growth. The government has been setting up a few high-tech parks across the country for facilitating these young startups. Alongside, Bangladesh also has set up Startup Bangladesh Limited, which is the venture capital arm of the government. And the government has a purse of $65 billion, which they are going to deploy within the next couple of years. In terms of the startup landscape, the startup ecosystem has been improving over the last few years, which has been pushed by the COVID scenario. The e-commerce sector is $3 billion odd, and it's expected that within the next 3 years, it's going to double in size. And alongside, there has been little investment when you compare with India or Pakistan, but the overall international investment in the startup ecosystem has significantly increased over the last couple of years. Last year, we received around $415 million, and it's expected to increase significantly. Two good news is SoftBank and Sequoia have started investing in Bangladesh, and they have made a few investments over the last couple of years. And there are a good possibility that there might be some good exits, because the Bangladesh government has recently established the SME stock exchange, through which the smaller companies, the startups, can actually go for an IPO and give exit to their investors. Next slide, please. In terms of import, as I've told you, Bangladesh manufactures a lot of cotton-based apparel. Cotton is one of the main importable items, since we don't grow, or Bangladesh does not grow cotton. Last year, it imported around $7.7 billion of cotton, and $311 million worth came from the US. There is significant potential for increase in export in the coming years. Wheat is also one of the main importable items, because we don't produce a lot of or grow a lot of wheat. And last year, we imported around $1.47 billion of export, and there is also a good potential for US-based businesses. There are, in the agriculture sector, there are some other opportunities in terms of agricultural equipment, because mechanization is happening gradually. Food processing sector is also going on the up. Apart from that, agri-infrastructure consulting and cold chain facilities also would see significant investment in the coming years. Next slide, please. There are certain challenges. Of course, Bangladesh is a developing country. There are certain challenges. Road infrastructure is a major challenge. Government has been investing significant in that area, but there are a number of areas which require the government's attention. Traffic is a major problem, particularly within Dhaka. Internet connectivity is a problem, although Bangladesh has access to submarine cable connections, but due to rising demand, there has been some quality-related issues. Bangladesh's state-owned submarine cable company has recently undertaken an investment plan to double the capacity within the next 2 to 3 years. And labor productivity, while we have significant labor force, labor productivity is a major challenge, and there are significant opportunities or scope for educational institutions or skill development institutions to invest in further uplifting our labor in the coming years. Next slide, please. So I'll come to the end of my presentation. So thank you for the opportunity, and look forward to receiving any kind of questions regarding the content. So thank you. Over to you, Michael.
Go ahead. Thank you. We have been getting some great questions coming through. So before I get to those, though, would like to turn it over to Sid and Fong to share their insights and thoughts. Sid, your trip is coming up. If really interested to hear a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Michael, and thank you for both the speakers, Jeff and Zahid, for giving this broader overview. One of the things I wanted to start with was to introduce the U.S. Bangladesh Business Council, which is a relatively new entity based in the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which is the world's largest trade association based here in Washington, D.C. We work with over 5 million businesses, small, large, and medium. So we have a very good understanding of what the business community needs on a daily basis, especially as they're looking at the international market. One of the things that I want to just communicate as part of this overarching mission of US companies engaging with Bangladesh is that we as a business community need to shift our attitude and perspective towards Bangladesh. It is a new Bangladesh, it is a new frontier, it has a different ecosystem than you may have heard of or may have experienced in the past. There is a receptivity in the government, in the bureaucratic channels, in the ecosystem of the policy making that allows for dialogue. It allows for an opportunity for you to have case managers at their investment development authority. They really want to have the opportunity to speak with business, understand and shift their policy environment that allows for it to become a more conducive, more attractive, more competitive engagement destination for commercial trade and investment relations. I want to have the opportunity to perhaps talk a little bit about the policy ecosystem, more so than some of the very distinct, clear, step-by-step opportunities that Zahid has laid out and Jeff has laid out. Part of the ecosystem of working in a new environment is just trying to understand the stakeholders on the ground. One of the things that I think is a really good opportunity, in addition to a future foreign commercial service office that can provide the services needed, there are various sector-specific and sector-agnostic trade associations on the ground that can help you be good partners, find you the right avenues, and give you an exposure to different kinds of businesses on the ground. For example, the apex body, the Federation of Bangladesh Chamber of Commerce, the American Chamber, that is the accredited American Chamber of Commerce of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce based in Dhaka. These are places where you can go and find partners, network, and have the ability to engage with other companies of your size or of larger size to find that joint venture, to find that partner on the ground. Two, in the larger ecosystem, what does an LDC graduation actually mean? I think part of the challenge to understand is that the LDC graduation comes with many different implications. Bangladesh will lose its TRIPS waiver that allows it to export locally made products to other LDC countries. It will have not an abrupt, but a ceasing of certain international development assistance. So the trend that you are seeing for your size of business to start in Bangladesh is right now, because the idea is that Bangladesh will shift in a way that has a early stage intellectual property framework. It has an early stage of developing an economy that is conducive to investment and trade and not necessarily rely on development assistance. The third piece that I wanted to bring was BIDA, the Bangladesh Investment Development Authority, like Zahid mentioned very clearly, is starting a one-stop service for investment portfolios, clearances, administrative registration processes. the important thing to remember is that they're still in the process of coordinating interministerially. So there are going to be teething pains for any company going into Bangladesh, because they are still developing that digitally connected system to allow for companies to move in smoothly. One of the pieces that was brought up was the bilateral relationship. And I think here's where an important avenue is available. This is where the US Bangladesh Business Council can be a really helpful tool. We want to give companies of all sizes a voice to be effective partners, to say, what do you need on the policy environment? I saw some of the questions that came through there. These are the inputs that you can provide to us, that we can help inform the agenda between the two governments of the economic and commercial side. It helps us to share ideas with both governments of where they can focus their economic engagement on. There are active engagement portfolios like the high-level economic consultation between senior government officials, a trade and investment cooperation framework agreement to talk through resolution of opening up different markets, market industries, open up certain sectors. So if there are sectors where you're feeling that you don't have the ability to enter or facing serious market barriers, these are the avenues that can be used on that front. The fourth piece that I want to raise is on the economic diversification side. RMG, ready-made garments, has been the core sector that has completely uplifted Bangladesh, both from a gender and women's economic empowerment side, as well as on the foreign exchange and macroeconomic stability. I think a key piece is that now Bangladesh is starting to learn from its RMG sector and starting to think about how it becomes economically diversified to include electric cables, small electronics, light engineering, furniture, cycles. There are new sectors that are opening up that allow medical equipment is one of the key ones that are becoming more and more critical. And Bangladesh does have growing capacity to develop that. The last thing I will mention is on the digital sector. A lot has been mentioned around that. One of the things that surprised me, which shouldn't have, given the immense talent in the country, is that Bangladesh hosts the second largest IT freelance community in the world. About 300,000 young entrepreneurs who are engaged with US companies, European companies, really developing the ecosystem for a very strong digitally connected economy. So as you are thinking about services that you want to use in Bangladesh, there's an immense talent pool that you can jump into. I will stop right there, Michael, and kind of wanted to make sure some of these disaggregated comments kind of fit into the larger points that were raised before.
Thanks so much, Sid. Really appreciate that. Just real quick before I turn it over to Fung, what are the dates of your trip? Who's going to be on your visit to Bangladesh?
Absolutely. So we're very excited. We're taking our first delegation of about 20 companies, about 30 US executives across the board, from digital economy, financial services, energy, aerospace and defense. We have insurance folks, transportation folks, manufacturing, healthcare, of a wide variety. We will be there in Bangladesh May 8th to the 11th with the support of the US Embassy and the new US Ambassador to Bangladesh, Ambassador Peter Haas, as well as the strong support of cabinet level meetings that we will take on the policy environment. How can we enhance the US-Bangladesh economic relationship and build that community and relationship on the ground?
Great, thank you. And I think all of those efforts are important to one of the questions that we got, or one of the points that we got, is just the perception issue with Bangladesh in terms of at the C-suite level. having them consider Bangladesh as a place that they want to do business. Fong, can I turn it over to you to share your kind of inputs and insights? I know you're keen to talk about a little bit more about some different sectors that you're seeing, increased activity and interest. So over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And first, thank you, Michael, and the team is Seamless for organizing this panel. I'm very happy to be here to share my perspective with really excellent fellow panelists. Just a little bit about me and my company. So Bao Group Asia is a strategic consulting firm focusing on the Asia Pacific to help the world's leading companies navigate the political, economic, and regulatory framework around the region. So we had on the ground presence in almost all the markets in Asia, 26 in total. And we have a headquarters in Washington where I'm based. So that gave us a hands-on understanding of the issues that US companies face when doing business in Asia. And so that's the perspective that I'm coming from. We have been in South Asia and Bangladesh for a long time. And Bangladesh has been a particular success story of ours, given the amount of interest from companies and how they have successfully find opportunities, resolve problems, and deliver values. But there's definitely the kind of perception issue where the larger companies, they know that they have to be there, they have to be in one of the fastest growing economy in the world. But when you get to the small or medium size, there's definitely a barrier there. So as my fellow panelists has done a great job in laying out the landscape and the big picture. So I'm not going to go too deep into that and keep my remarks short. I just want to go a bit deeper into the trade policy environment, how the Bangladesh government has viewed foreign trade and investment so far, the opportunities and the challenges, and adding a little bit of regional perspective to what Jeff, Sid, and Zahed has shared earlier. So in the early days of the independence in the 70s, the Bangladesh has pursued a very strictly closed off trade policy with import substitution and self-sufficiency as the center of the policy. However, the government has quickly realized that that kind of policy is not effective to stimulate growth. And since then until now, Bangladesh has moved towards a more liberalizing policy, which aims to transition the country's trade strategy into a more outward-looking one. And so in recent years, there are a few steps that the government has taken to open up trade relations and support trade facilitation. So for example, in 2019, Bangladesh has launched the National Single Window for Trade Facilitation, and that's led by the National Board of Revenue 2 years after the country ratified the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement. So under that single windows, and the government will set up an electronic system that allow both importers and exporters to file all imports, export, and transit information via a single electronic gateway and reduce face-to-face interactions. And that will address a lot of the challenges that Jeff and Zahed has mentioned, like corruption or delay in processing paperwork. So the idea is to reduce the processing time for imports and exports paperwork from 8 days and 5 days, respectively, in 2019 to just 5 days and 4 days by 2023. However, as these kind of aspirational program, we have to wait and see, but there's definitely a will to tackle some of the very difficult issues in trade and import and export. And also Bangladesh is the signatory of UNSCAP's initiative of cross-border paperless trade. So this is another initiative that the government is undertaking in order to facilitate a paperless trade system. And lastly, on a broader level, the government is formulating the import policy for the period between 2021 and 2024. So this is the key legislation that govern imports of all kinds of goods into Bangladesh. So since this panel, we're focusing into export to Bangladesh, this is very relevant for you to keep an eye on. The draft has not been issued yet. However, given the trajectory of the past few policy orders, the number of restricted items will most likely continue to be reduced, and the tariff structure will be further liberalized. So it will offer further openings for exporters to come into Bangladesh. Also, I wanted to touch on the initiatives that Bangladesh is taking to be a member of regional free trade agreements and other bilateral agreements. It doesn't have an FTA with the US. However, to be realistic, we all know that the prospect for the US to enter into bilateral FTA right now is rather slim. But at some point in the future, Bangladesh may be invited to join the upcoming Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, which is a very ambitious US-led initiative that focuses not only on trade, but also a few other pillars to set standard for important aspects of the economy, infrastructure, supply chain, and investment in Asia. So that could open tremendous prospect for bilateral cooperation between the two countries. And not only that, but also Bangladesh with other countries in the region as well. So that's the longer term outlook. And so in terms of investment, I don't have much more to add to what the insights that all the other speakers have said. Just want to say that, as foreign and private investment in the country grows, so will the opportunities for US companies to export raw materials, machinery, equipment to help set up and supply for manufacturing in Bangladesh. And private investment has played a crucial part in Bangladesh's recent growth. FDI has been on the rise, and it reached 2.6 billion in 2020 and will keep growing. So with really good fundamentals of the economy and the government providing duty incentives in the forms of tax holidays and other subsidies, there's really strong opportunities for both investor and exporters into the country. Not to paint a too rosy picture, so I wanted to add a little bit to what Jeff has mentioned in terms of challenges in Bangladesh. So corruption, bureaucracy is a big issue. I remember Zahid has mentioned the logistic system is another headache for companies operating in Bangladesh. And regulatory framework is very complex. A lot of the regulations are obsolete or needs updating. And even though the government is open to consultation with businesses, with stakeholders in the country, the process is difficult to navigate. You're not given enough time to provide inputs. And even if you provide really good inputs, maybe the government does not have the technical capacity to take them on. And I'm sure Sid can talk more about that, Jeff, as well, as you work day to day on these kind of issues. So I think that Jeff gave really good advice that local partnership is a great idea if you plan to make your first move into the country. I would like to echo this point that to have people on the ground to guide you through the process, who understand the nuance and the system would be very, very helpful. With that said, as the last speaker, I have the easy job of just rounding up all the good insights that my fellow speakers have shared. So Bangladesh is now at an economy as a critical juncture where it's moving from the LDC rank into the middle income rank. The government is very focused on investment in multilateral cooperation to reorient its trade infrastructure into a post-LDC world. So in the meantime, it still benefits from donor fundings and projects with preferential terms. And that, coupled with strong economic fundamentals and a robust, eager workforce, and also consumer base, there are a lot of potential areas that US exporters and investors could explore. And I look forward to continue the conversation.
Thanks so much for those remarks and insights. And I realize we only have a couple of minutes, so any questions we're happy to take up offline. I do want to keep tight on time, as I know folks are quite busy. I just had a quick follow-up question. One came through related to this kind of, I believe Jeff's comment, almost everything in Bangladesh is centralized in Dhaka. how do you perceive this as a challenge or an opportunity? Just quick question, are there states, are there provinces, are there subnational kind of government bodies that, at least in the US, those doing business in the US are familiar? Every state is different when it comes to labor. Every state is different from a number of different perspectives. So can somebody comment on that?
I can really quickly. Yes, there are subnational jurisdictions, both departments and subunits. They're relatively weak when it comes to business. They're mostly there for providing social benefit, things like that, getting out services to the populace, but they're not really there as a point of control for business. That's all centralized. So that's why it's to go to your comment about is centralization on DACA a benefit or a curse? It's a little of both. It means that you don't get a sandbox to go test things out like you would maybe a United States market, where you could try things in some unit. But it means that you do everything first time in DACA and it better work. But then it's also it's far simpler. You don't have to worry about a lot of complexity. You just know where you have to go. And that's why it's a bit of a benefit as well.
Excellent. Well, we're at time. If there's not any kind of burning final remarks from our speakers, from our panelists, I think we'll pick up things offline. Again, everybody will receive a copy of the recording. Nasser, I know you are trying to, I think with all of us, kind of raise the profile, it sounds like, of Bangladesh. So we'll be sure to follow up with you and give you as much ammo as you need to be able to share, information about the opportunity in Bangladesh for your business. So with that, thank you, Jeff, Zahed, again, staying up late, almost 10 o'clock or now just past 10 o'clock for you locally. Fong, for your comments, and Sid, wish you all the best on your trip in early May.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Very enjoyable. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.